So I'm going to be doing a reading of this book called The Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, as well as an introduction by Eric Hobsbawm. In the spring of 1847, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels agreed to join the so-called League of the Just, Bandergerechten, an offshoot of the earlier League of the Outlaws, a revolutionary secret society formed in Paris in the 1830s under French revolutionary influence by German journeymen, mostly tailors and woodworkers, and still mainly composed of such expatriate artisan radicals. The League, convinced by their critical communism, offered to publish a manifesto drafted by Marx and Engels as its policy document, and also to modernize its organization along their lines. Indeed, it was so reorganized in the summer of 1847, renamed League of the Communists, and committed to the object of the overthrow of the bourgeoisie, the rule of the proletariat, the ending of the old society which rests on class contradiction, and the establishment of a new society without classes or private property. A second Congress of the League, also held in London in November through December of 1847, formally accepted the objects and new statutes, and invited Marx and Engels to draft a new manifesto expounding the League's aims and policies. Although both Marx and Engels prepared drafts, and the document clearly represents the joint views of both, the final text was almost certainly written by Marx, after a stiff reminder by the executive, for Marx, then as later, found it hard to complete his texts, except under the pressure of a firm deadline. The virtual absence of early drafts might suggest that it was written rapidly. The resulting document of 23 pages, entitled Manifesto of the Communist Party, was published in February of 1848, printed in the office of the Workers' Educational Association at 46 Liverpool Street in the City of London. This small pamphlet is by far the most influential single piece of political writing since the French Revolutionary Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. By good luck, it hit the streets only a week or two before the outbreak of the revolutions of 1848, which spread like a forest fire from Paris across the continent of Europe. Although its horizon was firmly international, the first edition hopefully, but wrongly, announced the impending publication of the manifesto in English, French, Italian, Flemish, and Danish. Its initial impact was exclusively German. Small though the Communist League was, it played a not insignificant part in the German Revolution, not least through the newspaper Neue Rheinische Zeitung, which Karl Marx edited. The first edition of the manifesto was reprinted 3 times in a few months, serialized in the Deutsche Londoner Zeitung, corrected and reset in 30 pages in April or May of 1848, but dropped out of sight with the failure of the 1848 revolutions. By the time Marx settled down to his lifelong exile in England in 1849, the manifesto had become sufficiently scarce for him to think it worth reprinting Section 3. Socialist and Communist Literature. In the last issue of his London magazine, Neue Rheinische Zeitung, Politische Ökonomische Review, which had hardly any readers. Sorry, my German is non-existent. Nobody would have predicted a remarkable future for the manifesto in the 1850s and early 1860s. A small new edition was privately issued in London by a German émigré printer, probably in 1864, and another small edition in Berlin in 1866, the first ever actually published in Germany. Between 1848 and 1868, there seem to have been no translations apart from a Swedish version, probably published at the end of 1848, and an English one in 1850. Significant in the bibliographical history of the manifesto only because the translator seems to have consulted Marx, or, since she lived in Lancashire, more probably Engels. Both versions sank without trace. By the mid-1860s,